Hello everyone, I'm Loretta Wilken and I am the Master Gardener in Lakeside, and I am also proud to say that I am a gardener groundskeeper here also. And what we are going to be working on today is putting together an evergreen wreath. And it's something that you can do, it's not difficult, and what I'm going to be mostly working with today are evergreens that were around Lakeside on the grounds, and pine cones, some natural features that you can use for your projects at home. Another one of the great things about this is that it would be a nice family project. Your kids could go out and find the greens with you, find the pine cones. It can be a little bit of an educational idea that you can sneak in there without them really knowing about it, where you can talk about the types of greens that are used and the types of pine cones that are used with them, because different types of evergreens have different pine cones with them in different shapes. So I always used to sneak things like that in on my kids because they'd grown when I tell them that it was going to be educational, but they didn't know a lot of the time. So what I'm going to do is put together a wreath with the fresh evergreens, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And I already have one assembled, so I'm going to give you the basics on how to work the greens into the wreath, and then I'm going to use the finished wreath and give you some different options as far as what to put on it and how to use it. You can use these wreaths either as a hanging decoration or a tabletop centerpiece. So there's a lot of possibilities with it, so I'm going to show you a few things. First, there are a lot of different greens that you can use in your yard, and if you don't have greens available, just about any florist or box store will have bunched greens for you. What I would look for when you're looking for greens, especially if they've been sitting out at the retail stores, are I always go underneath the bundles and find the ones that haven't been in the direct sunlight, because those haven't dried out as quickly. They should be nice and fresh, the needles shouldn't be falling, and I also go for some that have a great fragrance with them. But you do want to make sure that they're as fresh as possible and they have a good color to them. And different greens, depending on the variety, will be at different price points. So usually pines and some of the firs will be the least expensive. And then once you get into things like noble fir and some of the other greens, you'll see a price point that'll spike in those. So you really don't need anything fancy, but it does give you some different textures if you want to work with that. So I do have some different types of greens that were available in Lakeside. Chances are you have a lot of these in your yard already. So if you're going to go out and clip them, just look maybe on the back of the plant and clip it where it's not going to be as noticeable. And then if you wanted to wait to prune your evergreen shrubs with an evergreen wreath in mind, you certainly don't have to prune them in the fall to keep them going. So what I'm going to show you are some of the different greens. These bundles, and I'm going to be working with these quite a bit to show you how to put it together, are different types of fir. So the firs are multi-needled. They're connected to the stems singularly, and that's one of the ways to know that that's that type of evergreen if you're trying to identify it. This is another type of fir. It's very flat, but you can kind of maybe see that the needles are each connected to the branch individually on those. This is a type of spruce. It's a blue spruce. Spruce are very similar looking to the firs, but they are definitely pointier. So if you're working out in your shrubs and you're not sure what they are, if if you get into them and they're a little bit touchier, they're ouchier, then it might be something in the spruce family. But both of the fir and the spruce hold up really well as far as working with them with the greens and the longevity for them. The next greens I have are pine. And pine will dry out a little bit quicker in your arrangements, but I do like them because they're wispy. They give you a really different kind of texture. And the way that you can tell a pine usually is that they'll droop on the tree. There'll be a definite arch in them, and you can see how these stems are doing that. And pine needles are connected to the branch in sets. So they're not individual needles coming off of this branch. They're usually in 3s or 5s or 7s. So that's one of the indications that they're pine. This is a different kind of pine. This is a white pine. I'm not sure what kind this is, but you can really tell that branching effect on there. So these would be really great to give you a nice curve in your wreath, or if you're using them in pots, it just gives a good cascade effect in them. Makes them kind of graceful looking. The next set of greens I have are junipers, and there's this type, and this is kind of a scrub juniper. It's what really grows in the quarries around here. It'll grow just about anywhere. So if you have these in your yard and you don't care for them and you want to get rid of them, this would be a good way to use them up. So there's this type of juniper, and then this is another type that you can use. And these are great if you're using them in a larger wreath. They really give you a nice shape and texture, and they have the blueberries on them. These are really aromatic, so if you're going to be using them indoors, any of the greens, I would take your hands and kind of ruffle them to just so that you're aware of how they do smell, because especially once they're in the house, they're going to warm up and they're going to be even more pungent. So those are the junipers. These are types of cypress. And the cypress and the cedar look a lot alike. That's why I kind of looked at them. But a common cypress in your yard are arborvitaes, and they're great because you can do just about anything to an arborvitae and it's not going to damage it. So if you did want to clip some of these, they're great to fill in, and they also give you a really pretty light green, like fresh color in your greens arrangements. This is cedar, kind of similar to, I'm sorry, this is cypress. So it's kind of similar to the cedar, but it's definitely flat, and this does have a fragrance to it. It's kind of spicy. So this is good. A good one if you want to lay something around the base of a plant, or maybe some candlesticks or something else you want it to go to. Boxwood is usually available. I purposely didn't prune mine back until this season because I do use it inside, and it was going pretty wacky. So I have some really nice sections of boxwood to use. And I like these too because they are a different texture. They're a smaller leaf, and they're different depending on how you're looking at the leaves themselves. But do be aware that boxwood does have a scent to it that isn't always so pleasant. So if you are using them inside, make sure that you kind of keep an eye on, these will dry out quicker also, so keep an eye on that in your arrangements. And the last one that you can use are yews or taxus. They're the shrubs that are prevalent in a lot of landscapes. They're another one that you can prune back and cut back, and they're pretty indestructible. So if you do have these out in your yard, I just took this off of one of the shrubs out at Wesley, and it was just kind of sticking up. just like that, and obviously it shouldn't be growing that way anyway. So don't be afraid to use these. They are fairly flat, but you get a lot of branching and they're a nice filler to use. Another one that you can use is holly. If you're fortunate enough to have some of this in your yard, it's just a really pretty type of texture. It does dry out a lot quicker, so if you're using it in a wreath outdoors, it's probably going to last about 2 weeks. Or if you use it indoors, it has a shorter life. It's only about a week. But the holly did really well this year in Lakeside. So if you have holly bushes, you may have some that have abundant red berries that would work out really well in your arrangements. So those are the kind of greens we're going to be working with today. I want to give a little background on using evergreen wreaths. Evergreens are a sign of everlasting life. Some of the other reasons people brought them into their homes or used them outside was that the Romans placed them over doorways, and it was a sign of victory and status. I use one at my back door, and it has an east exposure, and the sun hits it just about all day until about 4 o'clock. So it warms up, and I use different types of fir in it, and it just smells really good. It's so welcoming. It's definitely a Christmas memory for me. So I just like to have it at my back door. That's the one I use the most to get in and out of my house. So the pagans used them a long time ago to brighten up their homes. Because of the long winters, they would bring just different types of evergreens in. And they are actually the ones that started using the idea of them in a wreath, but instead of the traditional Christian use as an Advent wreath, which the Lutherans started in the 16th century, they would use a wagon wheel or a different type of wreath, and the 4 sections that they used were the elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. So it was possibly off of that idea that the traditional Advent wreaths came to be in later years. So if you're going to use your evergreen wreath, if you use it outdoors, if you can place it in a spot where it doesn't get direct sunlight all day long, it will last longer. If it's exposed to the weather where it's getting rain or snow on it, it will last longer also just because of the moisture. But then again, you don't get the fragrance that I talked about too if it's in a more secluded spot. So it's kind of a trade-off. If you're using them indoors, it's usually about 2 weeks before they really start to look stressed, but you can put them over your sink and mist them. Just make sure they're dried out when you go to put them on your tabletop. And there are some things that'll dry out a whole lot quicker, like the boxwood and the holly that I talked about. So what I'm going to do is show you how to put together the greens on a base. And I will also show you the equipment that I had that I'm going to be using. So I usually like to lay all of my tools out. It just makes it a whole lot easier so I don't have to go searching for them. Not that they're all in one place to begin with, because that would be too organized. But so what I have today is I do have a glue gun available, but usually with fresh evergreen wreaths, I don't do a lot of gluing onto the wreath itself. I would possibly use that for maybe ornament balls or picks that would be used, or gluing something onto pine cones that can be put on the wreaths with wire. There are some pine cones that I have that have glitter on them. Kind of a glitter gal, just because from a distance it's what catches your eye when the sun shines, and I have grandkids, so of course I have glitter everywhere right now. But you can take any pine cone. If you do find the pine cones and they're closed up, just bring them in a spot in your house where they're going to warm up, put them by a heat vent, and they will start to pop and give you a really nice shape. It doesn't take long for that at all. So what I would do with these pine cones is use a spray adhesive and give them a good coating, and then I have like an icy look on these, and just give them a really good sprinkling and let them dry. What I do want to warn a little bit about with that is that the spray adhesives usually have a pretty strong odor to them. So if you're going to spray pine cones, and especially if you're going to use them indoors, make sure that you spray them and glitter them, and maybe put them outside on a porch where that glue can dry and that adhesive smell can wear off before you bring them in the house especially. I have wire cutters, scissors, pruners. This is paddle wire. It's a number, I think it's a number 22. When you buy wire, it comes in different gauges. So the higher the number, the thinner it is. So I'd use at least a 22, and you can go thicker if you have it. But at least go at 22. I tried it with a lighter wire, and it was, I didn't think it was going to be secure enough when I used it. I have florist tape to secure some ends if I have any silk that I want to hide the ends on. There's a pipe cleaner for me to hang the wreath. And then these are water tubes. And when you make your wreath, if you use ivy, which is another type of green that you can use to kind of weave it in and out, and a lot of people have ivy in their yard, I would cut it and put the ends in water tubes, and it will last a whole lot longer. So if you want to use it and you only need it for a day or two, that would be a nice accent to have your ivy with it. Another thing that you can do with ivy to make it shiny is to use floor wax, just like a spray floor wax. And it also keeps the moisture in the leaves, and it'll give it a really pretty shiny look to it when you use it in your greens and pieces. And you can get all of these supplies at a florist or at any Hobby Lobby, Michael's, any of those kind of places, Joann Fabric. They have any of these supplies for you. So I'm going to start putting together this wreath, and I do have one completed that I'm going to work on as a base. And what I found is that these wreath forms, this is a 12-inch size. It doesn't sound very big, but once you get your greens on it, you're going to have less room inside, and it's going to add quite a bit on the edges. So I would err on the side of going a smaller size base rather than go too big and have to fill it in, because that means it might be bigger than what you need it for, and it's also going to be more expensive if you're buying the greens to use on the project. So this is a 12-inch, and it was only $3. And years ago, I used to just use like a single wire, and it just became really clunky. So if you don't have these, you could rig something up yourself. If you have a styrofoam form at home, and you want to use it up, you could use a styrofoam base and tie onto that. Wouldn't recommend that you go out and buy a styrofoam one. I would go with the wire instead. So what I'm going to do is, this actually has like a raised area on one side and it's flat on the other. I'm going to take my greens and just use some pruners and get a nice assortment of branches and sizes. You don't want to go too big on this. But I'm actually going to work on the flat side of it and start at a point where there's usually a pretty side to your greens where you can tell that they're either bending that way or the needles tend to go in a certain direction. So make sure that the pretty side is facing the top when you turn it over. And then just start layering different greens on there. And you can kind of follow the shape of it. I'm just using one type of fir right now. But what you can do is take your wire and just start it. And I usually go in a little bit of a branch just to make sure that I'm securing it into something besides the stems. And this paddle wire is great. All you have to do is start pulling it onto the base and secure this end on it. The other thing that you want to keep in mind, since you're using wire, is that if you're, when you're putting it on your door or even on a tabletop, you want to make sure that any wire that you're using is secured into the inside of your greens so that the wire doesn't scratch your door or mar your tablecloth too. So make sure that end is tucked in. And I'm going to take, this is some blue spruce. I'm going to add some of that in there just for some difference in color. Do another layer on top of that. I'm going to have it poke out the sides a little bit on both sides. And then just take your paddle wire and go in and give it a good tight wrap. And maybe you don't have as many of the fir as you want to use. Go in and use some of the clippings from the plants from your yard. It'll give it another texture set in there, a little bit different color. So you're just going to keep building onto the back of this. Make sure it's nice and tight, so that as you're going, you can see the different colors and textures in there. And you can make it tighter, but just make sure that you are overlapping quite a bit so that you don't have a gap in there with your greens. There will be some other things going on top, but it's good to have a really tight base on this. So I'm going to put one more layer on the back. And I think I'm going to use some more of this fir, just because I like how tight it is and just has a nice form to it. So kind of catch some of those edges. So normally I would just keep going around the edge of this. But what I'm going to show you is I'm going to work with this and just start to put some layers on top of it. And this is where the different textures can really come in handy. I just like a lot of variety in mine. So this is the white pine. So go in, and this is where you're going to put another layer on top of this. So once that circle is all done, just go in and put a nice layer of greens on top of that. I'm going to put a little bit of this juniper on there because it has the berries on it. And don't be afraid to cut out those chunks and just use portions of it to kind of fill in. This gives it just a nice different look. If you want it thicker, just add more greens. If you want it just to be a really classic look, go more heavy in 1 or 2 types of greens. Entirely up to you. And the great thing is you can kind of lay it out. What I did on the wreath that I made is that I basically laid it out first, and I had the greens that I knew I was going to use, and then I went back and I wired it all together. So you can do it a couple different ways. You can kind of play with it, or put it together and then go back and assemble it the way you need it to be. Stick a little more white pine in here. So that's kind of the base that we have. Kind of pull this out a little bit. So another thing that you could do, you actually wouldn't have to do this whole wreath. You could use this base at the bottom, do a nice arc on it, or use it to the side. You could weave ribbon in and out of the form itself. So if you don't have a lot of greens, but you want to use the form and just do a nice little door piece or centerpiece, that would be a nice way to do it too. So that'll give you an idea on how to put the greens on it itself. It's not difficult. Use your imagination, a lot of possibilities with that. So what I have here is a wreath that I have completed already. And I used mainly the fir that I used for that assembly, and the blue spruce, and I have some of the kind of wilder juniper in there. I wanted it to look a little bit less designed, a little bit wilder. You can just go in and tuck. You don't necessarily have to wire things in there, but if you wanted to add some greens in there, I just put some boxwood in there, and then if it dries out or you get tired of it, you can always pull it out. So this is my wreath that I put together. This is how it looks on the back, which isn't a bad thing either, because mine is situated on a door where I'm actually looking out, so it's not ugly on the back. So do make sure that all of your wires are pushed into the evergreens themselves. Take a look and see what you think is the best top and bottom to use. And I'm going to use this as my top. So put your chenille stem, your pipe cleaner, on, and I like to use those because they aren't scratchy. And make your hook before you get all your pretties on it, so that you're ready to go when it's all finished. So there are different options that you can use these wreaths for. I'm going to show you a couple tabletop scapes that you can do. So if you use your base, these aren't always on there really tightly, so you can move them around. The first one I'm going to use is, I'm going to use candlesticks in there. And the great thing about this piece, since it's kind of crazy, is that you're not going to see the bases on these because these don't match. Not too many things in my house match. So I'm going to use the candle holders in the center. And the ribbon I have is has some gold accents in it. And whoever invented the wire edge ribbon, I hope they made a fortune and they bought an island and they are living happily ever after, because the stuff is amazing. It's so forgiving. So this has quite a bit of the gold color in it, and it's definitely more of a traditional, I think kind of Williamsburg-y kind of ribbon. So what you can do with it is, since it's so forgiving and it's wire edge, just go in and you can tuck the end in, or I like to leave little tails on it. This one I'd clean up a little bit. But give it some area. Don't be tight with it. Just go in and give it quite a bit of area to work with. And sometimes it'll kind of go in those nooks and crannies, but if it doesn't, just take a piece of your wire and kind of attach it in there. Especially if you're hanging it too, you're going to want to use some of that wire. And play with it, give it some texture in there. You can turn it if it's double-sided. And there are lots of possibilities that you can do. It's just very simple, but it gives you quite a bit of color. And to me, this look is a little bit elegant, but you could use some pine cones in clusters. Just kind of tuck them in there. Now, if you were using this as a door swag, using this ribbon and the pine cones as a door swag, what you want to do with your pine cones, it's just so easy to use them for vertical pieces, is take your pine cones, and there'll be a tighter base at the bottom. Just take your wire and go in there and pull it tightly and give it a really good twist. Make sure that your tails are long enough so you can put it onto the frame wherever you need to use it. If you have a lot of pine cones but they're not a large size, do clusters of them. Do 3 of these together. You'll have 3 different wires, and then they can just go around the base, where it'll give you a bigger show, but you don't have to invest or go looking for something that's really large to begin with. So that'll give you a nice look. Usually 3s or 5s are good to work with as far as odd numbers. It looks a little bit more balanced, but you really wouldn't have to do that. You could do something like this, and even if you had some extra juniper to set it off, if there weren't any more of this in there, you could put some different greens around that type of arrangement also. So that's one of the ideas for a tablescape. You could also, if you do want to go crazy with the glitter, gold pine cones would look awesome. You could either spray them or with gold paint, or you could spray them with glitter. So I know how my 6-year-old granddaughter would probably vote. It would definitely be the glitter. So some other things that you can do that are just really simple. And a lot of these things I've had left over from other projects that I've had in the past, and the ribbon's still good and I hate to throw it away. Just very simple. Make some bows and place them on there. I could see using something like this on a wreath or as a tablescape, and maybe putting a raised bowl of cranberries or apples or something in there for your table, grapes, some fruit together. Just kind of dresses it up a little. And these you don't even have to attach them if they're on a tablescape. But if you do use them as a wreath, make sure you do secure them on the back. lots of possibilities. This would be a wreath where these are some things that I had left over from another project that I did. So go in and just kind of figure out how you want to put this on. For this one, I think I just want to maybe do a little outline on here because these aren't really large. I don't want to overwhelm it with, since the ribbon's fairly large. But I am going to make a bow, and you can make a traditional bow. What you think of when you look at a wreath or you go to the store, it just has like 7 different points on the bow. What I use in some of the pieces on grounds for the pots are, they're a little bit more dimensional, they don't look as flat. So give yourself a tail on it and go in and pinch it. And instead of going over here and going under, I make a piece and pinch it there, and then do another loop. Kind of pinch it. And I usually use about 3 of them. And then cut that fabric right there, give it a tie with the wire, and then put it on. And then the next part of it is that you will add in some more loops to this, but it's not going to give you that flat look in a bow. It's going to be more dimensional. So once you have that, awesome ribbon, take it apart if you mess it up, and then just go in and do some more loops. Probably go with odd numbers. So I could do 2 loops and a long tail, or add that in, give it a tail, or have it go around the edges, and then wire that in. And then what I'm going to do with that is just take these snowflakes, and this is where my florist tape came in handy because they were a little ratty on the edges. You are going to secure these in here with some wire, but when you lay it down, take a look at it, see where you want to put them, and then go back in with your wire and secure them. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming, but it'll give you a little bit of dimension also to your piece. If you have the really big snowflakes that are usually about 3 inches big, they would be awesome in there also, where you could have them coming in and out at different angles, and then have these smaller ones kind of as an accent in there. So kind of an icy look on that one. The important thing is make sure that you do secure them, because I don't think the glue gun is going to work on your greens as easily. You can go very traditional with just the reds, the deep reds. I love this color of red. Has a little green edge on it. It is wired, so definite advantage. And for this one, since it's not a real thick, it's not wide, I probably weave this in and out on the greens to really pick up some color all the way around the wreath. So I'd have a base that way. And then I like the idea of this being a little bit more natural. So these are my icy pine cones. Again, kind of work with them in 3s, and it gives you a little bit more balance. Figure out where your bow is going to be, then add your pine cones. And on this one also, I'm going to tuck in, these are artificial berries. There are natural ones that you could pick up, but they don't tend to last as long. So this is something that you're going to, these are wire bases, you're going to go in and bend those around your wire frame. So kind of tuck them in. It'll give you color all the way around it. It makes me think more of an outdoor natural type of wreath. It's not, there isn't any glitter except on the pine cones going on. And kind of keep in mind too, if you were doing your wreath a larger one and it's on your front door and you want it to be seen, either light it or the glitzier the better. That's why I like shiny and glitter on different things, because the sunlight will catch it and it'll give it a whole different dimension and a different look, even if it is kind of a natural theme that you're going with. So that'll kind of give you an idea on the colors. This isn't how I would put it together. It would definitely be more refined, but that gives you an idea. And then this ribbon is glitzier. It picks up the red and the berries. It has some shine to it. So it just gives it kind of a whole different feel, depending on what kind of ribbon you want to use. So that's another concept or an idea. And then the last one I have is a little bit more on the natural side. Well, not really. It's pretty glitzy now that I look at it. This is another one of those projects where this is ribbon I had left over from something. So it's also going to show up really nicely from a distance. So find your top. And this one I already did kind of a go through. I have a lot of extra length in the ribbon that I want to use in here, so it looks a whole lot more free form. So these are going to be anchored down with your florist wire. It's going to come through the center. I would make a bow up here on top, but this is where I would do either more clusters of the pine cones. And these I would probably make pretty glitzy. I wouldn't go natural on this since your ribbon is so glittery and decorative. So give these a painting. Or you can use small ornament balls. These were used in another project already that I did, but your ornament balls always come with an ornament top. What I would recommend that you do is use your glue gun and secure that top to the ornament itself, and then take your wire through the ornament, because these really aren't going to stick real well on the greens themselves. So the great thing about it is you can kind of lay your assortments out. And what I would do with this one is I'd make a little, before I secured it and I'm putting the ribbon in, I'd do like a little two-loop in here around the ornaments themselves. So this actually would be these would look more like this. You're just going to make little loops. Same thing, pinch it, make another one. Leave a tail on this one to kind of match that. And then this is going to be where you nestle your, I hope you didn't watch me cut that wire with a scissors, because I should have used my wire cutters. So you're going to just use these little clusters to secure your ribbon on there. And then take your ornaments. Once you run the wire through it, they've been glue gunned. And I just kind of tuck maybe one on each side. So you have that kind of look to it. can mix up the colors. You could string more ribbon in between there. I kind of like them when they're clustered like that, just to keep them plain so that you can see the different sections on them. So it's a good way to use up little ornaments too, if you have them at home that maybe you use for another project or you just need some color. So, okay, well, I think that is all I wanted to show you today. And it's perfect because my time must be up. I hear the church bells. So I hope you have a really great holiday, and if you do have any questions, you can email me at gardening@lakesideohio.com, and I will check it there and I can help you with your questions and answers. So have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.